Hi, welcome back to my channel. So a couple of days ago I released a video about my five top fantasy books, uh, my personal favorites of course, and then I mentioned that I did consider a few other fantasy books, but they didn't finally make the cut, and I'm going to talk about those ones today, and these are going to be the fantasy books that were not my favorite fantasy books, but you still might like them, basically. First off, these two books I'm not going to talk about at all because I haven't unfortunately read them, and these are, of course, The Chronicles of Narnia by what's the author? I forgot. Chronicles of Narnia. I forgot the name of the author. Never mind. You know what it is. So yeah, that one, and of course the other one is Elric of Molteban. I think that's the name. Those two, the reason why they're not on my favorite list, I haven't read them. Narnia, probably I'm not gonna read anyway. Elric, I'm definitely going to read in the future, so I might talk about that at some point. Okay, first book that I'm going to talk about is The Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind. Actually, first book is named Wizard's First Rule. So this is a book that, while I was reading it, I was actually pretty into the series. I did slowly change my opinion of it over time, and this was probably the second or third fantasy series that I picked up after Lord of the Rings, and I was pretty new to the genre, so everything was new to me, so I would have placed it higher at the time, probably. I would have counted it as one of my favorites, and it has kind of dropped a few notches since then, partly because there were many similarities with the Wheel of Time series, and a character was basically blatantly ripped off from Lord of the Rings. People who have read Sword of Truth probably know what I'm talking about. And of course, partly because the books kind of drop off in quality after book 6. So yeah, those are the things that I didn't like about it. And of course, the writing style is kind of blunt. I guess when I was younger I didn't quite mind about that, but now I do mind a little bit. And the author really increasingly infuses his conservative political views in his later books. I don't have a problem with that, but he does do it in a little bit of a heavy-handed way, and I didn't enjoy that much. The book, sixth book in the series, has some similarities, for example, to The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and but it's still kind of different from it, so you could read it, on its own. Yeah, and also there's some torture and BDSM stuff going on in the first book. The books are definitely not kid-friendly. There's like murder and rape and a lot of stuff like that. So be warned. Don't give it to your kids to read. But if you don't mind any of this stuff, or maybe you're just seeking it out specifically, this series is still an interesting read. So yeah, you could check it out. Next up, of course, we have the Wheel of Time series. So my problem with the Wheel of Time series is I read it after I read the Sword of Truth series. So that was kind of my problem. So even though I know the Wheel of Time books were the original books, but the Sword of Truth did copy a lot of the stuff from Wheel of Time, and through no fault of the author, I kind of couldn't get invested in that so much because of it. And by all means, this is one of the great fantasy series of all time, and I should have liked it more, but I don't know. Also, the reason is I kind of felt I couldn't get invested in the characters or the storylines that much. I did read it and I did kind of enjoy it fairly well, but ultimately, if you ask me now to tell you what happened in the story, I wouldn't be able to tell you a lot. I know a few snippets, odd pieces of information. Like, I know Rand is the chosen one, and there are some ninja sand dune Fremen people invading in like book 3 or 4. I don't know. There are some sorceresses. Men are kind of dumb. Women are smart. That's all I know about it. I don't quite remember the storyline that much. Maybe it's because I didn't pay much attention to the storyline when I was reading it. Maybe I was like a little bit absent-minded. I have no idea why I don't remember much of the story. So maybe I will pick it up again. Actually, I do plan to pick it up again, and maybe I'll give it like a better shot next time. I'll focus a little bit more while reading. I do want to read it again because I haven't finished it also, so I kind of need to start from the beginning anyway. So yeah, that's Wheel of Time. Definitely check it out. It's still pretty good. It's still one of the great fantasy series. So you might like it more than I did the first time around. Next up, we have Sword of Shannara. I don't have much to talk about this. I only read the Sword of Shannara, the first book. I haven't read the Elfstones and the other books, and I just didn't like Sword of Shannara. I felt while I was reading it, I read it right after Lord of the Rings, or closely after Lord of the Rings, and I felt I was reading a generic version of the Lord of the Rings, and the storyline was very similar. I disliked it so much that it basically put me off reading any of the other Shannara books. Maybe that's a shame, because I did hear that the other books were better and departed from this type of storyline. So yeah, maybe I made a mistake not continuing. I might return to this series as well. So yeah, that one is probably the only one that I kind of seriously gave up on. Next up, Good Omens. So I really wanted to add this one in the other video of my favorite fantasy books, but the rule was kind of not to have the same author twice, and it's also not really technically a classical fantasy book per se. It's more, I don't know what it is, but it is definitely fantasy, but not like in the typical sense that most people imagine. So I guess that's another reason why I didn't add it in the previous list. And this book was written, of course, by the great Terry Pratchett, and almost equally as great nowadays Neil Gaiman. And I recently watched the Amazon Prime adaptation. It was pretty good. So in anticipation of that, I read the book again, and it's still awesome. It has all the humor, hilarious Terry Pratchett. It's combined with Neil Gaiman's has also pretty good storytelling, knowledge of mythology, stuff like that. In this case, it's more Christian mythology, Christian characters and stuff like that. It's a story about the end of the world, and an angel and demon basically becoming unlikely allies. They want to preserve the world because they like it there. And this is another book that's a good entry point to Pratchett. If you're kind of intimidated by Discworld and all those fantasy elements, this one is a standalone novel. It's not set on Discworld, it's set on Earth. And it's a great for people who aren't comfortable with dragons, wizards, swords and sorcery type of stuff. This is a good place to start with Pratchett. And it's also a good place to start with Neil Gaiman as well, I guess. If you read this and then you like it, you might want to try American Gods by Neil Gaiman, which is different in a different style, but definitely thematically kind of similar. So if you like Good Omens, check out American Gods by Neil Gaiman as well. And that's it about Good Omens. Definitely one of my favorite books of all time, so for sure check it out. And finally, Harry Potter. So please don't kill me and don't murder me in comments. I actually didn't like Harry Potter, and I will explain why. There's a simple reason. I was basically too old when I first read it. That's it. I missed out on Harry Potter when it was really popular, when everybody was reading and everybody's watching the movies. I kind of skipped it for some reason. And when I did finally get around to reading the book, it didn't quite resonate with me. I wasn't really impressed that much. It was still a good book, but it was actually a pretty good book, really good for kids, but I didn't really get super interested. I was interested in reading other stuff at that point in my life. I was already a little bit older, so yeah, that's why I just read the first book. I never really continued reading the other books after that. So yeah, that's a simple reason. And maybe one day when I have kids, maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I'll read it with my kids or something. So, but for now, it's definitely not one of my favorites. So those are the books that I've read that definitely weren't my favorite fantasy books, but still might be good for a lot of readers, for you guys or for other readers. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you absolutely hated the sound of my voice and you can't really stand me at all, make sure to hit that dislike button and never subscribe to this channel. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.